But something strange happening.
Yeah, should we dive
Something
immediately?
crazy tactics are going on.
Yeah, the remaining game is a corker and it's a stunner. This is beautiful, Judah.
Beautiful checkmate pattern.
Genius.
I don't know if I've seen this pattern before happen in a game.
Alright, if that doesn't get you going for a game of chess, then I don't know what does. And even better yet, I've got some Fabiano Caruana reaction coming up because he gave his thoughts in the commentary studio after his game had finished. Now this is Alireza Firouzja playing with black. We're going to look at his side of things against Nordibek Abdusatorov, another very talented youngster, and it was always going to be tactical fireworks. These guys are so exciting. So d4, d5. c4, c6, the Slav defense, and after these knights develop into the game, knight c3, Alireza now goes for e6, which is known as the semi-Slav. So you've got this triangle of pawns, but the bishop inside the pawn chain, and very often it's coming this way. So we see e3 now played. If instead of that you go bishop g5, things can get really sharp. You've got the anti-Moscow variation, you've got the Botvinnik variation, just some crazy stuff. But okay, we see the calmer move. Now knight beats d7 and bishop e2 from Abdusatorov. You can go bishop d3, you can go queen c2, multitude of moves of course. We get bishop d6 from Alireza, and now both players prepare to fianchetto. We get the bishops popping out, the king's castling, and now this sequence of moves is really standard. You just see the queens developing and the rooks coming to the center, and this is really now the starting point of the middle game. Now you can push on with pawn e4 immediately, but you get a kind of mass liquidation, doesn't give white any kind of huge advantage, and generally speaking, when you're the side with the slight more space, you want to avoid exchanges if you can. You know, Nordibek's got 2 pawns in the center, Alireza 1. So okay, he plays a bit more slowly, and so does Alireza. He can go pawn c5 already, but he goes pawn h6. We get bishop f1, just tucking back, opening up the rook. And now here's a classic Alireza move. So c5 is the top computer move here, just sort of striking at the center, trying to create a balance with the pawn structure. But instead, we get bishop a3. Kind of a strange looking move, because that bishop was looking quite powerful already on d6, spraying in both directions. And here Alireza is exchanging it for one which looks slightly less passive, plus the queen will then come offside. So okay, we get takes on d5 played. Now you don't want to capture with this pawn, or then you can take here, the queen recaptures and knight b5, and you hit the queen, the d6 square and the a pawn, and you can't defend all of those threats. So instead we see this pawn recapturing, and we see now the point of white taking there. You get pressure down the c file against that backward c pawn. Now we see takes on a3. The queen recaptures, and this is a great move by Nordibek. He goes rook b1. He's threatening now to push pawn b4, which takes away the retreat of the queen and would take control of this a5 square, meaning that the queen would have no retreat squares. Rook b3 threatened, so you'd have to go b5, not what you want. So a5 comes from Alireza to stop b4, and once again he sets up the old bathtub as he did against Gukesh, but this time his bishop is not sitting in the tub, it's watching from the outside. That sounds kind of weird actually, doesn't it? Anyway, we see bishop d3 now played from Nordibek. Again, he doesn't go e4, you're just helping black liquidate, and you'd be left with an isolated queen's pawn at the end of the line. So queen e7 now from Alireza, he comes back on side, and now queen b2, nice kind of nudgy move from Nordibek, and maybe he's preparing ideas of a3, b4, just cementing this as a constant backwards pawn and weakness. So what does Alireza do? Classic positional chess, knight e4. You're getting attacked over there, we'll try and generate counterplay over here, you know, really common chess idea. Now again, Nordibek doesn't change the pawn structure. You definitely can't take with this one, you're now losing a piece. And if you take with this one and this, and then you can start attacking as black, you know, again, why change that pawn structure? Instead, he leaves the pawn structure as is, brings a rook to the c file, again looking for play down here. So Alireza drops back the knight, looks to exchange a defender of the king, and then get some play going there. Again, just common ideas in these queen's pawn games. Sometimes the pawns, can't get the words out, it's late at night here, 10:30, get flung down the board, right? Anyway, we see knight captures, the queen takes back, and this is one of the better moves from Nordibek. And now he has a kind of fork in the road for the plans here. So he goes knight a4, pressuring the queen side, good move. He also could have gone knight e2, going on some kind of journey like this, maybe back to f1 when you run it with the engine. But okay, he goes for the counterplay idea, still good, keeps this knight honest, opens the rook. And now Alireza plays a great move, rook e6, lifting that one into the attack. You know, it could attack, it could defend. Also, the queen soon sets up a battery, as we'll see. And in some lines, when Alireza gets c5, it takes the rook off this diagonal from the bishop. So excellent multi-purpose move. Queen e2 now from Nordibek. So he senses some possible danger around his king. Maybe even he wants to exchange bishops as well and then get at this pawn. But what does Alireza do here? Well, this is really just the star play and concept of the game. It truly is exceptional. He plays pawn to c5. Now, this is not the genius move, but it's just a beautiful idea, so typical of these structures. You know, I play these myself, because it looks like you shouldn't be able to do this after pawn recaptures. There's too many white pieces on that square. But here's the follow-up move. It's pawn d4, opening that bishop, threatening checkmate. Such a common idea to give a pawn to open the bishop in these structures. You know, Anand once famously did this in a semi-Slav game against Levon Aronian, immortal game. You got to check that one out if you never have. So mate is threatened. The queen blocks with queen g4. One of the top moves is chopping them off. Does Alireza do that? Hell no, he doesn't. He drops his queen back. He loves those pieces on the board. He wants to attack, and he's creating some nasty pins down here. Now, once again, there's really a lot going on here, but I'm just going to try and simplify things. You can't take on b6 with pawn or knight, because the problem is you're running into knight e5. Not only does it fork these two, but when the queen drops to defend and then the knight takes here, queen recaptures, well then you're on the line of the rook and the pawn takes and it's on the queen. It's all horrendous. So you have to deal with knight e5. So bishop f5 is the best move. You know, bishop b5, not so good anymore for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Now the rook is attacked, but this time Alireza goes to f6 with the knight, counter-attacking the queen and correctly assessing that now he shouldn't block the e-file once that bishop has moved. So the queen drops back. Technically best according to the engine was queen g3, but okay, we'll stick with it. You know, this keeps an eye on pawn d3, for example. And now Alireza goes rook e5, hits this bishop. You can drop it back. It's a whole different line, but Nordibek goes for pawn c6, counter-attack on the bishop. Alireza takes that pawn. We see rook recaptures, and now just beautiful attacking play. Does he recapture this bishop? No. He crashes through on e3, and it's just the absolute correct way to attack. Because if you try and retreat the bishop and save it, you know, something like bishop b1, well then you take on f2 and it's just curtains. If the king captures, well this is simple enough. You're losing the queen, that's overwhelming material loss. And if instead of king captures, you take with the queen, well now of course you pick up the rook here. We can see the power of this battery. So what do we see? We see the king sidestepping away from those threats. And the best for Alireza here was actually rook e8, setting up the Alekhine's gun, and then still creating that problem that you can't retreat the bishop, or we take here with a deadly attack. But he misses it. He takes the bishop. Really natural move, still leaves some advantage. But in this variation, now white gets to take on e3 and just starts to consolidate. It gives the game roughly level now, whereas Alireza had about a pawn advantage or so before. So does Alireza swap the queens? You guessed it. No, he doesn't. He goes queen d7. He hits this rook, and Nordibek really just blinks now and goes wrong. So queen c3, strongest move. Okay, none of this stuff is easy. You know, these guys are just human. He plays the rook back here. Such a natural idea. There were all of these awful pins against that rook a moment ago. You drop back, you defend it, but now Alireza just seizes the initiative like a boss, right? So who would go knight d5 here? A lot of people, I suspect. You centralise the knight, you hit the queen, you cover this pawn, everything like that. It's one of the top engine moves, it's the second top move, but the first top move is this one. Rook e8, allowing the pawn to drop with the follow-up of knight e4. And the pressure on this pawn is just horrible to deal with, especially in the time pressure now. So how do you defend that one? Well, Nordibek makes a terrible blunder here. But it's easy to see why he does, because there's no easy defense. I mean, say you push that pawn with pawn f3, well then you really badly weaken these dark squares. And the patterns are just amazing. So the best move here is king g1. But then you hop with the knight, you check, and you're winning up an exchange, so that's no good. I mean, it's the best, but it's still not good. And what happens if you go king f2, hitting the knight? Well, now the queen invades. Now there's no rook e2, obviously that square's covered, and after the king takes, this is the deadly thing. You slide with the rook, you can't come here with the king, or you just get mated on g2, and after you step up, there's check, pawn g4, and if you want to pause and look for the mate in 2 here, then please do so. Yeah, it is mate in 2. So the simple, not simple, but the quirky little move here is rook h5. I mean, it looks simple when you see it, but the pawn is pinned, so the king has to take, you mate like this. Just some really nice variations. So running it back here, you know, f3 no good. Well, what if you try and cover with the rook? Then there's knight g3 check using the pin. What if you try and cover with this rook? Still knight g3 check. The king goes and you crash through here. So none of these things are working. The best was actually king g1, allowing that pawn to drop, but not with check, and then you take here and everything, and still a bit better for black. Anyway, Nordibek brings this rook across, going for the queen. And that queen is really short on squares. You know, it can't come down the d file or here, can't come anywhere over here. If it steps to the e file in any way, well now of course white's doing really well, all of the stuff is pinned, you can just go king g1. And if it steps to say the c file here, well then there's even rook takes on e4. And after rook recaptures, you land this check, you're picking up the queen. Anyway, so that's why the queen doesn't move. But what's the shot that you can play, that Ali Reza finds, that the commentators are just loving, that Fabiano reacts to in this manner?
Yeah, I didn't really see most of the game, but the final attack is really beautiful.
So the move to play, well done if you've guessed it and you've not seen the game, is knight takes on f2. Double exclam, a brilliant move.
This is beautiful, Judah.
Beautiful checkmate pattern.
Genius.
I don't know if I've seen this pattern before happen in a game.
Why is it so good? Well, you're leaving an entire queen to be taken. But the problem, and well done if you saw the follow-up, is that you can take here on h3 with check. Now, David Howell actually blundered with knight h1 check. I mean, he's an amazing player, but he got the wrong concept to start with. And they talked about, oh yeah, I've never really seen this pattern over the board so much. But it's just so nice because the knight box is in combination with the rook, but then the second rook cuts the e file, which is really, really nice. Anyway, the king can't move, queen has to block, you deliver the mate, right? So this is the problem, you cannot take the queen, it's immune. So we see takes here first with check, the queen recaptures, and now Nordibek has to give up the queen. You just can't do anything, this rook is attacked. Again, if you move it here, you run into the same checkmating patterns. All the same mating patterns are just landing basically if you try and move the rook. So the queen has to chop, and now we see queen b5 check, nice intermezzo before recapturing the queen. The king goes, this one drops, king takes back, and now we see the point of this geometry. The queen bounces over, you get this extra tempo. So the queen starts checking, drives back the king, and we now see the power of this queen centralized on e3. I mean, that is not a queen, that is a spider, right? Look at those 8 legs just pointing out in each direction. That is a black widow ready to eat the king. The power of a centralized queen is just deadly, especially when you've got minor pieces looking like this. So f5 from Ali Reza, the other thematic idea when you're attacking with a lone queen, will use those pawns, get them into the game. So knight b2 looks to reroute in. We now get queen c3, the knight comes, and now pawn a4, you cannot capture that one or your knight drops here. So we see rook e1 played, supporting knight to e5. It gives up on this b3 pawn, but you just couldn't defend it anyway without dropping a minor piece or, something horrible. So in this way of playing, at least you coordinate your minor piece and your rook and, try and set up a fortress. So g5 from Alireza, knight f3, king g7. And now the next couple of moves, they're called misses by the players, but it doesn't really change anything material here. Alireza's attacking and he's got all this pressure, as we'll see. Already now the queen invades to this f4 square and it's just so hard to hold everything together. The pawns here, the knight is pinned, so Nordibek counterattacks this pawn. The king blocks, it comes to g7, not g6, not wanting to run into any checks later. Not that you can move the knight, but prophylactic chess, right? Don't put your king on checking squares. And now rook g1 comes back, covers this pawn, but we see pawn h5, just using those pawn levers to rip open the position. And captures was not played because then the pawn runs through. Yes, it's currently pinned to the king, but the other pins against the white king are way worse. So if you go rook g3 here to cover the threat to take, you sidestep the king and you can't hold everything together. If the king sidesteps to stay with the rook, also break the pin, well then you can do this, and this is just a one end game, queen against rook, that should be converted. So coming back here, takes wasn't played, we see king g2, and now I find this quite instructive. You can take with the queen and it's winning, but Alireza actually takes with the pawn, and this doubled pawn construction is actually really, really effective. The knight's driven back, and then pawn g3. Threatens all of this nasty stuff. So rook f1 comes, covers the f2 square, and now queen e3, the queen lands back on that deadly square, right? And what do? You can't go rook f3 here, or you drop your knight. If you go knight f3, then you check here, the king goes, and again, you want to deliver a checkmate here, but the knight's covering, but pawn g4 kicks away the knight, then all the deadly stuff happens. This is the power of these doubled pawns, which is really nice. So instead, the king goes to h3, and now Alireza finishes the game in style with queen to f2. We saw resignation here. Why? Well, if you take that queen, the pawn recaptures, and you're going to either win the knight or promote it through. Nothing can be done. And if you don't take the queen, say you slide away here to stay with the knight, well then again, you want to push the pawn on, but this time the knight takes. Well, what if you decoy the king? Again, the beauty of those doubled pawns. The king takes, then you push through. This is completely game over. So let me go back to the final position. Here it was. So I really enjoyed that game from Alireza. I mean, he's on some good form right now, taking his opponents into the wilderness of the forest and then just bamboozling them with these tactics, right? If you want to see another epic game from him, check out the video on screen. Do consider subscribing to never miss a future one. And thanks very much for watching. See you soon.